So I haven't seen a lot of instructional videos on YouTube that really have a lot to do with PTOs other than some old stuff from the 70s, you know, how they work and what they do. What I'm going to do today is do a quick video that might be helpful to some people. I know I probably could have used it the first time. Basically, we're going to change these gears out for this pump drive to match the transmission gears. So this is for a different transmission setup. It's a lot cheaper than just replacing the whole PTO, and it will save you a lot of time if you've already got your linkage and maybe your controls. This is a mechanical shift. There's air shift. Some are direct rod linkage shift. But anyway, we'll disassemble it real quick and blast through it pretty fast. I think it'll be helpful. So first you want to take the top plate cover off. I'm kind of cheating because I'm letting my cordless ratchet rather, kind of letting it build up a little bit of speed. When you take this apart, there's a guide or a driver that will select this drive gear inside. So that's freewheel, and then when you swing that over, it's going to drive that pump or direct shaft or whatever you have on yours. So you want to pull that off first, and that lets you get access to really the inside. It'll let you hold it. You want to flip it over. And the easiest way to do this is kind of get it in a position that works for you. And you'll just need some pretty simple tools. Everything here is very, very simple. Punch, hammer, stuff like that. Don't go too crazy. It's all pretty, once you start tearing into it, it's all pretty basic. So you'll tap this guy out. Shouldn't be too hard. There's not a whole lot that holds it in place. You'll see it start walking out over here. Take care if you have this drained. I've had this off a couple times already. I thought I could reconfigure it. I thought I could swap these gears around and make them fit and make them drive the way I wanted to. That just didn't happen. You have to replace them with the correct gears. When you're knocking this out, take care if you have the drain hole. This is kind of like a weep hole in the bottom of the transmission. Let you know if you've got a leak in here, if this seal's leaking. We're going to reseal this thing too. A big shout out to Terry at Chalks in Houston. I had called down there. One second. You don't want to go too far. You don't have to drive this thing all the way out. If you drive it all the way out, it makes your life a little bit harder. You're looking for that sweet spot. There we go. See how it's kind of walking around so you know it's loose? So now, I like to reach in here, push this up. And these are just regular Timken bearings, you know? Pretty handy stuff. So what we're going to do now is there's a snap ring that holds this gear set on. We're going to take that off and install our new gear set. Back to what I was saying, a big shout out to the guys at Randy's, particularly Terry. I had called once and talked to and believe me, I'm not being age discriminative here, but a young guy who had no clue what I was talking about. I basically emailed, this is your new drive gear, and you can see it's a totally different gear helix. But he wanted to know the what transmission I had. These are shims, and he just didn't have a clue. I knew that I could replace these gears, and I gave him the data tag off the transmission. And finally, I said, I will pay extra if I can talk to somebody over 40. And he didn't like that, but I called back and got in touch with Terry, who was very knowledgeable. He knew exactly what I needed. So the moral of the story here is don't always don't get discouraged in the beginning, because sometimes you're just talking to the wrong guy. So look, now this is a pretty wide spread, and this is a real tight snap ring, so I couldn't put a bigger set on here. I'm sure you know, but for the guys who don't, you can walk this thing out. You don't always have to grab the hole either. You can kind of push it out and walk it over and get you a nice flat tip and kind of work it off. See how it's kind of on the edge there? This is one of my favorite screwdrivers. I use it for adjusting carburetors. It's really thin. It's just a cheap old hardware store screwdriver. So you'll notice the video stopped because I forgot to put my phone on airplane mode, and my phone never stops ringing. So I stopped there, and I want to show how this gear set comes apart. So this is the original that we took out like this, and you'll slide this gear off. Now a lot of people think this is the drive gear that moves back and forth. This is actually the PTO gear. So this is done. This is our replacement from Chalks. We'll take a look at it. Looks great. It looks better than the original. See, it's got some nicks, but a totally different gear set. And again, the reason why I did this is because I tried to reconfigure it myself several times. So, you can lay that out, clock this. Now, I don't know if it matters or not, but I like my gears on anything to kind of run consecutive, just in case there's some double contact there. Shouldn't be, but just in case. We're going to set this to the side for just a minute. I'm going to show you. And again, that's why I'm cheating, because I'll spin this thing up, kind of get a head start. It doesn't have enough, in that case it did. Sometimes it doesn't have enough torque to just bust it off. So this is our input gear. We're going to take a look at our output gear. Now in some cases this will drive a shaft, in some cases it'll drive a sprocket with a chain. If you're talking about a chain drive, it just depends on your application. In our case, it's driving a pump. Take a look here. So the reason why this is offset, because in some cases you can actually turn it to change the position of the shaft, just depending on what's coming out on that other end. In our case, this is going to make it square. Push this sucker out, and that's our seal. Now, again, shout out to the guys at Chalks, because they gave me a seal replacement kit, they gave me everything. But I wasn't having any seal problems, I didn't have any leaks, the seal is in good shape. It doesn't have any nicks, it doesn't have any gouges. You know, overall, I'm kind of a, if it isn't broke, don't fix it guy. Some people might say, you're already in there, go ahead and knock that seal out and replace it. I'd rather have a good seal in the event that I do have to do this again. I'm going to save these parts, I'm going to put them up. Something that did happen though is when I was doing this before, I broke that snap ring. It broke right off. Now, Chalks gave me a kit. This is my kit right here that has everything. So it's got all the gaskets. It's got some PTO gaskets. It's got this gasket here. It has the seal. It has the shims. And it has that notorious snap ring there. Matter of fact, it has two of them. One thing you will need, and I hate to say this, but you're not going to put this thing in a vise and knock that out. It's just not going to happen. So either get somebody with a press or pick up a cheap Harbor Freight press and press that thing out. We'll walk over to the press in just a second and do that. Okay, so I don't use the press very often. It's a cheap, Harbor Freight special. But if you do a lot of stuff like this, or really any metal bending, I've made this metal brake. I used to use it quite a bit. I'd lay sheet metal in there, like heavy gauge stuff, and press it. I'd use this to, press angles. If you've got something you want to put a little bend in, and maybe you don't want to weld the seam, but be real careful. And again, there's better systems out there, but this works just fine. I've got a bolt that I use, it's a cheater. Tighten that guy up, line this guy up. And again, don't waste your time trying to beat this thing out. You hear that? You're gonna have to press it off, you're gonna have to press it back on. It's that easy. Okay, you can see we've got our new snap ring in for the slider gear. Everything's clean. That's going to be your big thing, is make sure everything's clean. Any little grit or piece of dirt or grime grinding away inside these gears, it's going to give you problems. So now we're going to run back over to the press. We got the new snap ring in, and press this on real quick. That you get this square going down. Now it's going to self-align to a point, not that point. See how it's kind of cocked? I was paying attention to the top and not the bottom. So we want that to all be on one, to where it will go on there nice and square. Now this should self-line. There it goes. Now you can keep your thumbnail or something in between there as a guide. Just don't make that same mistake I did before and snap that. So we're good. Give it a little bit of pressure, make sure it's seated, but you're not going crazy. You know, you're not trying to damage those bearings. So we're done with the press, hopefully for many, many months. Okay, we got our snap ring in place, we got our bearings, they check out, no grit, no grime. Some guys will polish this. We don't need to. It feels good. Remember, you can feel more than you can see. Sometimes people will put a little lube in these bearings. Again, this thing's an oil bath. I do like to lube up the seal before I put it in. I'm sorry, the shaft as it goes into the seal. Just stick your finger back there and line it up. Now we're going to put this guy back on, and remember, don't force this to fit. Let it fit on its own, because if you put it on there and try to hammer it in, it's going to cock that thing to the side. Somebody that knows more than me about this will probably tell you that that arrow means something, but I don't have a clue. Before I go crazy and tighten everything up, I like to snug it, because I'm gonna make sure everything works. And we get a little noise in there, but that's okay. That's probably because we had it filthy. Oh yeah, that got better. Yeah, that's just because the bearing's dry. You do want to check it though. You want to make sure. Sometimes I'll take a shaft, I have this extra input shaft, and I'll put it in there and turn it. If I can't get it to turn, I use this a lot when I'm setting up the backlash. And when you do that, you just want a little bit of play. So real quick, so this thing didn't run super long. It's not like this, so that's going to be like that. You want to know your orientation too, so I know when this is bolted up to the transmission that the drive gears are on this side. Just kind of make a mental note of that, or take a lot of pictures. So we're going to drop this guy down in here. Now you have some shims. Luckily, I like to reuse my old shims because I'm reusing my old bearings, and I know it was right. Okay, we're at the end. Kind of help it line up. We don't want to go too crazy. Maybe want to slide that guy over there. It's just real important that you don't force anything. Easy does it means just that. Easy does it. You can see the bearings kind of pushed out a little bit. Get your favorite flat tip. Just kind of push that guy back over. See? So we're right on the edge there. Everything's lining up. What you can do is drop your shim down in there. Use your pinky finger. If you got fat fingers like me, and it should tap in pretty gently. Oh yeah, that's gonna be tight. That is really tight. That's okay though, because it's not riding on the bearings. We want it tight because we don't want a lot of cross play. We don't want these gears walking back and forth on the main drive gear. This had a tab that was damaged. What that tab does is it keeps the shim from spinning with the gears. So it keeps the edge of your bearings from wearing out. So definitely make sure you get that back in there. Doesn't really have a lot of load on it, but you don't want this shim spinning around in circles every time you engage your PTO. Sorry for the noise. We're going to go ahead and disengage that. That's something we're looking for. So you hear that noise? It wasn't doing that before, but that's really close. So once I get this drove in, no matter what, this is without the pump engaged. Once I get that drove in, it's always going to be there, just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our shim to this side, and that's going to shim these gears over. So instead of watching all that again, I'm just going to knock this out. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have the shim moved over there. Okay, so we've got the shims moved over, as you can see. No noise, nice and quiet, smooth operation. I went ahead and dunked the bearings in a 5-gallon bucket of the oil I pulled out, so you notice you don't have any noise at all. Something, if you were paying attention before, being a good student, we forgot this snap ring. My lovely assistant Hannah noticed it sitting here on the bench, and so when I pulled this out to re-shim it, we went ahead and installed that snap ring. That's the one from the very, very beginning. So we've got nice quiet noise, or no noise, nice quiet gears, positive lock, the pump's turning nice and smooth. You'll notice, depending on your gear set, so Allison transmissions run clockwise. Everybody else, Eaton, Fuller, Spicer, it depends on the input gear on the transmission. So be advised, you may install this and your PTO will go the opposite direction. See how this is clockwise and counterclockwise? Just keep that in mind. So if you hook everything up, that was the original problem with this truck. We went from that truck over there with an Allison automatic to that truck over there, which you can barely see. It's an International with a Eaton 5-speed or Spicer. The last thing you're going to want to do is set up your selector. Now this is important because you have different stop points. so it will internally stop where you want it to. Now, okay, so after going through and getting this set in the right position, we've got it to where it'll freely go and lock in. And again, you're going to play with this. This has a gear on it. You're going to set it where you want. I want a long throw, so I've got a lot of room because it's cable actuated. Sometimes the air shift will have a short throw because it's going to be a very short cylinder just barely moving it. I like the long throw. One more thing to remember is have your engagement to where it pulls. Don't try to push it to engage. It pulls hard into gear and then it locks and gets the pump turning. It's a lot easier to push its way out because the way those gears are cut. So as this is going, it'll lock into gear on its own. And then the same thing, it'll push its way out. So have your cable or your rod or linkage, however you set it up, to where it pulls. 3 most important lessons to take away from this. Don't give up when you're looking for your parts. Just like a doctor or anything else, it's okay to get a second opinion and maybe talk to somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable. Maybe don't offer to pay extra to talk to somebody over 40 like I did. But it worked and I got some laughs. We're set up, we're ready to go. We'll install this later with some shims. It came with a shim kit, very helpful. I probably won't need it, but it's there. You'll sandwich your gaskets if you do that. I'll put it up there by itself with the one gasket, see how much backlash. Something I look for is just a little bit of play. You'll hear it click, 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 real small movements. If it meshes too tight, it's gonna scream, it's gonna whine, it's gonna be terrible. If it won't bolt up at all, then I'll use the shim, but I haven't. Another thing, look at all these tools. Out of all this stuff, all we used was a hammer, a 1/2 inch socket, an impact, and a punch, some snap ring pliers, and some screwdrivers. Real basic tools. We didn't have to tear in and use mics or shims or dial indicators or anything like that. It's real basic, so don't be afraid to tackle it yourself. Thanks again to my lovely assistant, Hannah. And if you can find a better video out there, don't hesitate to let me know and I will take this down. Thanks.